We're on the air. Harvey, what's today's date?
It is December 12th, 2022, corresponding to the 19th day of Kislev 5783.
It's the 19th day of Kislev?
Yes.
Really? Hanukkah's next week?
Yes, Sunday night.
Yes.
Are we doing Hanukkah tonight?
Coming
A
up,
little
it's
bit?
coming up.
No.
This coming Sunday? Oh, wow. How do you like that?
So we're gonna do Hanukkah next Monday?
Hopefully. Okay, so I started this topic last week. Very interesting, but I want to finish it today. The issue was there's two types of minhagim, just to recap quickly. There's one type of minhag where people decided, they get together, halacha doesn't require it, but people decided they want to start doing a minhag, maybe as a precaution or to prevent things. The most classical minhag would be kitnios, that people stopped eating kitnios because they were afraid that people would confuse kitnios with chametz. That minhag started around in the 1200s or 1100s, sometime around then. There are many minhagim in the Gemara. The Gemara says there was a minhag not to do malacha erev Pesach in the morning. Makam shenago, it's a whole parak in Pesachim about makam shenago. That minhag is binding because the Gemara says it's a din d'Rabbanan. The Gemara says you're going out of the pasuk al titosh Torah simecha. Do not forsake the Torah of your mother, which means that what you learn from your parents you should hold on to, and that's binding on the members of that community. People who are not part of that community, it's not binding. People don't live in the city where the minhag started. If there's a minhag of the city, it's only binding on people in the city. If people change cities, there's a whole discussion about what happens to the minhag. Okay, but that's one type of minhag. But the minhag that I want to talk about, that I started about last week, is the minhag of customary halacha. What is mainstream halacha? When we talk about what's the minhag, we mean to say, so what is everybody doing about this? So the Gemara expresses this on the first page. The Gemara says, first of all, in the Yishalmi, it says, the second part that's underlined, the Yishalmi says, Amar Rosh is also meres haminim mivatel es halacha. A minhag is mivatel halacha, which means it overrides the halacha, which is like a startling statement. And then on the bottom of the page, the Gemara says, further down, Rav Chanan Abai Hilchos Lamai. The Gemara had two discussions here. I didn't underline both. The one discussion was how big does a lechi have to be for an Erev, and the other discussion was what bracha do you make on a shahako? Well, we make on a shahako. We make a shahako bracha rishona and bracha nefashos and bracha achrona. It's not clear from the Tanoim what bracha to make. So the Gemara says, Amalei Rav Chanan Abai Hilchos Lamai Amalei Puk Chazi Mai Ama Devar. Go see what the people are doing. What's the minhag of the people? Rashi says Ma Amar Devar Ma Nohagu Ha'am. Or the very bottom of the page, Rashi says Heich Nohagim. What's the common practice? So that's the second type of minhag. That's a minhag where there's a common practice with normative halachic practice, and that establishes halacha. To the extent that the Gemara uses this language that the minhag is mevata halacha, it means to say that even though people think the halacha is otherwise, but the minhag overrides, because if everybody's doing it, so that becomes the minhag. So I wanted to show you two places where the Rush seems to ignore this principle of halacha, of minhag mevata halacha. We learned, one of them we learned last year, the other one we learned about 5 years ago. So let's turn to the last page. No, not the last page, but not the last page, but the page of, which page is it? Here, Advar Shmita. On page 10, the Rush, as you recall, started out in West Germany. He was a Talmud of Merami Rittenberg, and the evil king. I forgot what his name was, the Russia, but he went and he imprisoned the Maram, and he demanded an exorbitant ransom, and the Maram refused. The people would have collected it, but the Ramam said, "Do not give it ransom." We spoke about this at length when we talked about the Shalat. Is that what was his name?
Gilad Shalit.
Gilad Shalit. Very, and it actually is now relevant again. What's the name of this lady? The basketball player. Griner. Griner. So she was traded for a drug. What was he? Arms dealer. And there's been a big outcry that it wasn't a fair trade. The trade, and besides everything else, that it wasn't that by doing that you're going to end up having people get killed in order to save this. Poor lady. But it also encourages more such kidnappings to take place because, and maybe that's why the Russian government made a korban out of her to begin with, because they wanted to get this other guy out, so they made up some they trumped up. She had some marijuana vials of oil that she needed for her muscles or something. So they put her in prison for that, and they sentenced her to 10 years. So it was all the Russian. How can one talk about how evil the Russian Putin is and is? But anyway, that's what they did to Marami Rittenberg, and after the Marami Rittenberg died, they didn't even want to let the people bury them until they paid a ransom, and then finally the Marami Rittenberg was buried, and then the Rush realized that he was also in trouble, that he was gonna be next in line, so he escaped from Germany, and then he went south. So he went from Germany, or southwest. So he went to Germany, and he passed through Provincia, which is the Provence, and then he made his way into Spain. And in Spain, I forget, where was he? In Toledo, I think. What?
All lovers of Jews.
All
Lovers of Jews.
where?
All these countries.
All these countries, yeah.
That's why he kept moving.
That's why he kept moving, right. So, and he became the head of the Jewish community in Spain. So when he came to Spain, he decided to issue two psukim that at the time were very radical. So the first one is on page 10, has to do with Shemitah. Al Devar HaShemitah, Shematati es Yoda milichto bina Shemitah miyom boi l'eretz hazos. I didn't want to write about Shemitah from the time that I came to Spain. Ki dvarim rabim hayu li im gedolei ha'ir madua eina mashmitim kisafim. They didn't write prusbos in Spain, and nonetheless they collected the chovos, and it says in the Torah that if you have a chov and Shemitah goes by, so the chov is nullified, and nonetheless they didn't write prusbos. For Omrim shekfar nagu b'chol haaretz azos shelo lahashmid. He said they already had such a minhag in Spain that goes back generations. V'efshel levatel haminhag shenagu zeh yamim rabim. You can't undo a minhag that's an old minhag for practical reasons. Ki harbe milvos yishenos yesh ba'aretz azos. People lent fortunes of money, and they didn't bother writing a prosbol, and now you're going to go ahead and you're going to destroy the economy, and you destroy these people. They brought a raya that you don't need prosbol from the way the shtar choiv was written. The Rosh says I didn't agree to that the language of the shtar made any difference. Umatzasi hisnatzus la'atzmi al shmitas yadei atzmi she'eni misorer levato minhagam. He says he decided in the end that he was not going to undo the minhag. V'omer I need the efsher kevin shepashat minhag shelo hashmid v'hakol yodim havi keilu hisne hamal v'amana shelo tishmetena b'shvius. It could be that it's understood tonight that Shemitah doesn't operate, although a lot of Acharonim talk about what does that mean. Yeah, you mastered the Mashim because of the Torah. But the gist of it is that the Rosh was he was ready to do away with the minhag. Hidvarim Rabbim Hayulim Gedolei Hador Madu Eni Mishnah. So they said you can't do that. So he backed away because because it was it would have created such a tumult. The question is what did the Rosh hold in the end? Like what was his final position? And so the if you recall, the I didn't make a photocopy, but the Shulchan Aruch notes the fact that there's a machlokas about whether you need to write a prosbol. Where is it? In Samach Tes, I think. So the Shulchan Aruch says in the very beginning of Halachas of prosbol, not Samach Tes, maybe Samach Zayin here. The Shulchan Aruch says here, the Shulchan Aruch says Ein Shmitas Ksafim no Hagas Men Torah El Bezman Sheyav No Midivri Sofim Shetei Shmitas Ksafim no Hagas Man Azev Chol Magam. The Shulchan Aruch says it is knowing. Then the Ramah says Kain Hu Haskamas Aposkim Abel Yesh Omrim the Ein Shmitas no Hagas Bezman Azeh. There are those that say it's not knowing. V'nira she'aleihem samchu b'medinos elu she'ein noagim din shmitas klal b'zman hazeh. So that's what people rely on, that there's such a minhag. V'minhag hayu adayin noagim adayin b'zman harush. K'mo shekosav b'tshuva. The Torah quotes. It's the Rush himself says that was the minhag in Spain. Shahaya toveach kruchya levatel haminhag. What's a kruchya? A chicken? I think so. No?
It's screaming like something.
Like something. I thought I got like a
Some sort of like a croaking.
croaking
Croaking thing.
bird. There's a circle here. It's a what? A toad?
Toad?
Yeah.
It said like it said some kind of croaking.
It comes up in the Durham.
Croaking?
I think it comes up in the Durham.
You just had.
We just had it very recently.
We did?
Yeah.
Where was I?
So so whoever was giving the shir noted that it's come croak and kruch.
Yeah.
Oh, here he says in the Baragola, it says Sus Tur Targumo Shafnina Kruchia. I don't know what a Sus Tur is. I don't know. But whatever it is, they made tremendous commotion about it. V'lo Ashka Ashichu Bay. So they didn't pay attention to the Rush. Ukvar kosu gam kein achronim zal tam hat minhag she'ein nogim shmita k'mavur b'divi marik and the Truma Sedeshin and the Mariel the ein ledaktik achreim okay, so it's not the Shulchan Aruch says that the Rush was terribly upset about it and he tried to involve the minhag, but they didn't pay any attention to him. What was the conclusion? Did the Rush? And we saw that the Rosh here says that he didn't make an issue out of it because he said they told him you're gonna destroy the whole system. So most of the Acharonim say that the Meikar Adin halacha is not like the that is not that without a prosbol you can't collect the chov. That's what the Pitzli Tshuva writes, and he says, I am Bilvush, Shekasa, Rova Poskim, Eskimo, Shavalpi, She, Military, and Mishametis, Mismanazem, Mikom, Takanas Chachamhi, Shemitis Ksafim. So, but Ramosha, if you remember, we saw a tshuva. Ramosha had a tshuva about somebody who forgot to write a prosbol, and Ramosha said that the fact is that the Shulchan Aruch said, the Ramah says that was the minhag. That's the language of Shulchan Aruch. He says, that the Yesham den Shmita no Haggis Bisman Hazeh, Vaminag Habe Yinogim Adayin, Vaminag Hayunogim Adayin Bisman Harash. So Ramesh understands that to mean that the Ramah is okay with the minhag, and I mean here's an example of minhag mivat halacha. So the Achronim have a so the Ramah himself says that the what's the pshat in this minhag? It's like a crazy minhag. So the Trumas Sedeshin has a pshat, the Marik has a pshat, and maybe Shemitah is only knowing near Eretz Yisrael or other reasons. But it seems that the Ramosha understood that the minig that the minig is a valid minig, and if somebody didn't write a prosbol, he has a right to collect the chov. You remember Moshe amazing tshuva, and he says that if the lova if the Malva goes to the Lova and says, "Oh, okay, I don't have a prosbol, but I want you to pay me anyway." If the Lova says, "Go jump in the lake," so the Malva could go to court and collect the loan. He says first he should go to Bezdin, but if the most Batedinim are not going to recognize his psak, as Ramesh says, they're going to disagree. They're going to say that you didn't write a prosbol. It's not the Ramah doesn't mean that. So it's tough luck on you. And so Ramesh says. So then, since I hold that that's what the Ramah means, so then that's the minhag. So therefore, you could go if the bezin is refusing to operate. So you have a right to ignore the bezin and go straight to court and collect the loan from court, and that's the Avedin Ishtin and Nash. I don't know. It's a tremendous chiddush, but I'm just pointing out here that there was this tremendous struggle about whether this minhag is binding or it's not binding. We don't exactly know. It seems like the Rush backed off in the end. But even though he backed off, Ramesha understood that the Rush really held that way. He held. That's why Ramesha. No, just the opposite. The Ramesha held that the Rush backed off, and therefore the minhag has validity. He backed off, and that's why the minhag has validity. But according to the other Achronim, the way they understood the Ramah did not change his mind. The Ramah held that it's not valid, and therefore, if he didn't want to start up with the whole country in Spain, but if you didn't write a prosbol nowadays, then you're up the creek. So you what you see is that even though this was obviously it was a long-standing minhag, even though it's difficult to understand what's the logic, it was a long-standing minhag, but the Rush was ready to do away with it. So I posed the question, how come the Rush didn't say, Puk chazi ma amar devar? Let's go see what the minhag is. The minhag is that you don't have to write a prosbol, at least in Spain, that's the minhag. You may go to a different country, they did write prosbols, but in Spain, that's the minhag. So why would the Rush, what was he so upset about? Why was he trying to change the minhag in Spain? That's the first example where the Rush was not deterred by the minhag. But the second example is the tshuva that I'm going to show you now. This has to do with Mashiv Ruach. So really, I was hoping to talk about it last week about Talmud. I was hoping to talk about it last week when we at the day that we started, but it didn't finish. But here, the Gemara says on page 4, the Gemara says, "Begimel b'mar cheshvan," near the top of the middle of the page. Begimel b'mar cheshvan shvalim esik shamim. You start saying the same Talmud the third day of Cheshvan, Gemil Omer, B'shiva bo, Tesva yom achar hachag kedei she'egia achar she'visol l'nahar pras. You would start saying the same Talmud right away after Sukkot. But you wait because people have to get home and we don't want them to have to deal with the rain. So therefore, the flood, so therefore we delay it. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Lazar, halach Rabbi Gamliel, and then the Gemara says, Tanya Chanayam, uvegola ad shishim b'tkufa. In the Gola, you wait till the 60th day of the tkufa. That has to do with the equinox. When we learned it the first time, I figured it, I understood what it was about, but I don't remember anymore. But it's December, it's basically December 4th. That's 60 days into the tkufa. Probably some people here know what it's all about. So Rashi says, Uvagola. Rashi says, Uvagola ein shalom ad shishim b'tkufa l'shvishu makam namach ve'en shvicha mater kolkach. The reason why is it different in the Gola? Because Rashi says, because in Bavel, it was, the Gola then was Bavel. So it was a low-lying country, so they didn't need so much rain, because when it rained, the rain stuck around. In Eretz Yisrael, there are mountains, so when it rains, the rain drains. So you need more rain. So that's in Eretz Yisrael, they had to start earlier, but in Bavel, they didn't. So then Rashi says, if you look at I have it underlined further down, Rashi says, Ubevavel begola, mitoch she'enan tzricha l'gsham ein shom ad samach tuvas tishrei. In Bavel, because they don't need rain, they wait till the 60th day. V'chein ananogim l'chol minhagenu achar b'nei Bavel. And we do the same thing that they do in Bavel. In Bavel, they waited till the 60th day. So we follow Minhag Bavel. There's Minhag Eretz Yisrael, Minhag Bavel. We follow Minhag Bavel. Comes along the Rush on the bottom of the page, and the Rush says, Tama ani lama ananogim kibnei golaba. What does this mean? Why should we? Rashi says we follow the Bnei Gola, meaning Bavel. Why should we follow Bavel? Nihi deshashagano Bavli mikomokon davar hatoli ba'aretz in Bavel haisa mitzulas mayim v'lois tzrichas l'mayim. Just because Bavel had a lot of water, kol haratzis tzrichas l'mayim b'marcheshvan, but other countries need water in marcheshvan. Lama na'acher hasheilat shifu imshishim utkufa. Why should we wait so long? Whatever you do, him lohayamatu yared at shishim utkufa. If it wouldn't rain until December 4th, hay hazera avad, the grain would get ruined. Lama lo nasa Mishnah say, was Mishnah saying? Like the Mishnah. Uve provincia, which is in the Provence in France, in southern France. The Chef Schmeitzer quotes a few times the Chachmei Provincia. I forgot. There's a famous Schmeitzer. I meant to look it up. Something to do with that. If you have an animal, so normally you say Holchanach Harov, but if it's Kavua, you say Machsa Machsa. What happens if for half of the people it's a Rov and half of the people it's Kavua? How do you decide? That was a famous Chachmei Provincia. They were Gedolei Yisrael in Provincia. So in Provincia, what was he doing? How did he know it was in Provincia? Because he lived there. He made his way to Provincia from Germany. They in fact did what he thought made sense. They started saying the Saint Talmud in right after Sukkot. And it made sense, and it was very sensible in my eyes. So here's what happened when the Rush came to Spain. An amazing story. And maybe if you're no, do you remember the Tshuva of the Rush? You remember everything usually. Do you remember this? No. Baruch Hashem. So it's and I'm not repeating something that you know. The Rush says like this. He on page 5. This is such an amazing story. He b'shnas 5,703. When 5,073. When was that? I forgot to figure it out. So that would be about 700 years ago. So it was in the beginning of the 1300s. The Rush came to the Rush was born in 1750, and he came to Spain in the beginning of the.
No, not 1750.
1250.
Yeah.
You said
I
1750.
1750.
Well, I didn't mean it. 1250. He came in 1250, and he
Born in
died.
1250.
What?
Okay.
He was born in 1250. I'm sorry. He died in 1327, and at some point he made his way to Spain. I think he was over 50 when he came to Spain, so this makes sense. It was sometime. It was 13 something.
It used to be 1313, I think.
1313. There you have it. So Vahi Vishnas Chameshes Lafim Vishivim Vishalosh Ubriya Salam. Netzer Hageshamim. There was no rain. There was a drought. V'lohim ter kol hachar. The whole winter there was no rain. El ma'at mizir. It was very sparse. Vayikru tzalmus chanan Hashem losei smater al pnei adama. So they made tainesim. The Gemara in Tainus has all sorts of halachas about when you make tainesim for droughts. Vayi b'leil rishon shel Pesach. Comes Pesach achar tfilas arvis. V'adoni avi harash haya yoshev al Pesach beiso. So this is not being written by the Rosh. It's being written by the Rosh's son. V'adoni avi harash haya yoshev al Pesach beiso. The Rosh is sitting by his house, by the door of his house. V'nachlik sas me'achaverim omdim olav miminu misol. We're standing around the Rosh. V'yomer ata haya tov v'ora hadavar asher me'olan t'mei silov. Now's a good time to bring up the thing that bothered me for years. Lama lo yaskiru v'yishalo gageshem ad Shavuos. Why do we stop saying Masha Beruach and the saying Talmutar Pesach? We should wait until Shavuos because in that climate they needed rain that period of time. Vayanuhu ksas mechaverim tofu shetvia davar uzakim. So somebody the chaver said, "Okay, you're right. Let's let everybody know about it. That it's a good idea." Vayasu kain. So they did it. Vayasher beinehem, and it made sense to them. Vayishalchu l'chazan hakneses lahaskir l'machar hageshem. But they told the chazan that he should say in shul, instead of saying Masha Baruch, say Tal, he should say Masha Baruch Marda Gashem. What do you think would happen in congregation or Torah or OE or any other shul in the world if if some rabbi would say, okay, we're going to say no Tal, we're doing away with Tal.
I'll tell you, they throw the strogan at him.
They certainly they would do worse the tar and feather. So, but the Rosh says, "Vayaskiru b'nei hakneses agdol yudga mumidos." They said yudga mumidos, I guess, because they were davening for rain, and they said Geshem. So, what was the result? He called his giro. There was a loud noise or tumult. The hine rash mixes chachamim, and there was a tremendous outcry from some of the chachamim, asher lo hayah hadavar b'atzasam, because they weren't consulted. Vayotziu kol lemar shelo hayaroi laskiro she simen klalahu. They said you can't say Masha V'ruach in Pesach because the Gemara says it's the simen klala, even though they needed the rain, but in general it's a simen klala. The Rosh didn't engage in a fight. And he waited till Chol Moed. He waited till Chol Moed to explain his position. It's interesting that he didn't consult with the other rabbanim.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, when there was a cholera epidemic. So Rabbi Yisrael paskin that that the boys, his talmidim, were taking care of the victims. They shouldn't fast, and he said on Yom Kippur, and he said they don't have to do shiurim. And he supposedly he got up in shul. I don't know if it's a true story, but that's what they say, because it's not clear that you make kiddush on Yom Kippur if you're a chayla. But he could the kiddush is just bar pirkafin, so you could do it. He got up in shul and he made kiddush, and there was an outcry in what city was he in? He was in what was the name of the city that he was in? He was, okay, I'll remind myself. So there was a very big outcry because he was a young person at the time, and the older rabbanim said, "What's this? We don't hold that way, and why do you take it on your own to go ahead and change the halacha without consulting with us?" So he responded that I'm the one that took achrayus for the welfare of my talmidim. So I have a right to decide. I don't have to consult with anybody, and I think that I don't think anybody. There wasn't reported anybody was harmed by that. But you found where he was living.
I'm trying.
He was Kavna. That's where he was. He was in Kavna, the same place as Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan. But Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan, I think, was later. So the Rush says. So then the next paragraph says, Al ki shamati ki yesh tmeim al devarai. Since I heard, obviously, that there were people who were wondering about my psak, basi lefarish masha amarti, I decided to explain it. She'ein roi l'asok lifsok milahaskir b'lishal ata b'yom tov rishon shel Pesach, that it's not proper to say to stop saying masha v'ruach on Pesach. V'lo min kadu el mikvar yemim rabim be'ashkenaz. It's not a new psak that I have. El mikvar yemim rabim be'ashkenaz nisraamti al shnei dvarim shreisi shenogim b'yamim halol. I was surprised about two things, and you see he was surprised because he wrote about it in his parish that we just saw on the Rif on the parish of Rush. That they don't ask kishamim in when it's necessary. V'afagav their meaning of the parakam the tanya is Tanya Chananya Omer Uvegola Ad Samach Yom Utkufa V'Amar Rav Huna Bar Chia Amar Shmuel Halacha Kechananya V'Anam B'Chol Milsa Azlina Basa Chachmei Bavdo. Well, we normally follow Chachmei Bavdo. V'Avdini Kavase Heicha the Pligi Adadi Chachmei Bavdo Chachmei Eretz Yisrael. The Machlokes Chachmei Bavdo Chachmei Eretz Yisrael. The Babylonians were considered greater. The Talmud Bavdo Chashiva Ikar. But that's only b'davar iser v'heter, v'chiyav v'ptur v'tuma v'tayra. That's if there's a psak halacha. But davar hatoli v'tzarach hashah, but something that has to do with the need, v'ein bo shinui lavar d'v'tara, and we're not talking about violating an iser deraisa. Roi leilech achar hashanim v'hamekomos v'hazman. And everything depends on the time, the location, the year. The bubble shechanas amayim rabim bubble. There's plenty of water. Why it's richim shamim ad samachat kufa, so they could wait until the middle of December. And also they used to plant their seeds later in bubble. Alabaretz Ashkenaz, but in Germany, shizman azaru michatzi tishrei ve'elach. They already in the beginning of September they started to plant seeds. If it doesn't rain, achar hazera, the grain will get ruined. The birds and the rats will have a field day. So there's no reason not to do what they do in Eretz Yisrael. It's not that there's a machlokas between the bnei bavim there. She didn't able tamid devreim shurim lasses came. They don't listen tamid devreim shurim lasses kamosan. It's not a halachic machlokas. Also, bavavo hayatzar osin kifi hatzarchem. But they did what they needed to do. Mishnah shemer shishomer machesh and nishnis beretz yisrael kifi tzarchem. The Mishnah was in Eretz Yisrael, so it was based on the need. So, and then if you look at the bottom of the page, Minhag I'm, and the second thing that he's troubled by, that they stop saying Geshem Am Pesach. They say Tal. V'adavar Yidu Sheba Ashken is Iker Kimatvu Hu Hayidik Shamin Shebein Pesach Latzaras. They need the rain until Shavuos time. Mishnah Shomer Shemasikim Yom Tov Rishon Shal Pesach of Eretz Yisrael Nishnis. The Mishnah is for people living in Israel. Kasher Chachti. Lochem HaYiksir is Aram in Pesach. They harvested in Pesach. The Gamachit in Kvaram doing Komosayim, and the wheat already was grown. Vein Tzrichem El his Yamish, it had to just dry out. It was Mashal out of Teres until Shavuos. L'chein Eksham Sim Miklohem. Our Ba'ashkenaz, she Efshe L'tfu his Kaim, so let's say the Mutter, but in Germany, I get Ashkenaz usually refers to Germany, right? But she Efshe L'tfu his Kaim, so let's say the Mutter Shebein Pesach Asar, Sim Bracha Huhem. Adarabba, it's a bracha. V'lomo nishar niskar ad atzaras. And then he says, and he says, V'dinei chazar shalmar negashim yilahem me'atzaras ve'elach kamolu v'nei eretz yisrael mi'pesav ve'elach kamashal chachti. Shekol eretz v'eretz v'yitzarcha shalas. Every country should be according to its needs. Shalas u'maskers the kamosh eretz yisrael v'chukim minhag I'm, just like eretz yisrael and bubble. They're different based on need. Maskara ve'elu also lefi tzarchem, ve'elu lefi tzarchem. Who didn't shara ratzis the ma'ishna. Why shouldn't everybody do according to their needs? So then he says, Kishiyotzasi, and the bottom of it, where I have a bar. Kishiyotzasi me Ashkenaz v'varti derech provincia, shamati biman pishlir. It's what Montpellier. That's in provincia. It must be in provincia. Shahayu Maskiri Shami Zayin Chesmi Yoshim Albenai. That's what he already mentioned that we saw before in his parish on Shas. That when he was in provincia, he saw that they did it that way. V'marti Chachmei Man Pishlir Teratzim Mikusha Achas. You answered one kasha that I had. Why don't you say Mashav Ruach from Zayin Cheshbon? But what about my other kasha? Why don't you say Tal? Why didn't you say Murday Goshem until Shavuos? Ramesh Osen Commissioner Miyom Rishon Shel Pesach Poskim. So they said for that they stopped Pesach times. He says Amarti Hem Shema Einchem Tzrichim Bater Bein Pesach Atzeres. Why do you do that? Why you're inconsistent? Why don't you follow the same thing between Pesach and Atzeres? You should say Mashav Ruach. Amrli Shahar Behem Tzrichim V'yefshel L'tvua L'skayim Below Mater. It's true that they need the rain. V'marti Hem Kol Devarei Kasher Hem Ksuvim L'Mala. So I told them my shtickle Torah. V'yashur Mod Beinayim. So they decided it makes sense. El Shamru Masha Anu Shalom B'Shivim Marcheshvin Kachin Higu Chacham HaRishonim. The earlier Chachamim went ahead and they instituted. They should say Mashiv Ruach and Mashiv Ruach, Saint Talmatar and Zayin Cheshvan. But we can't change the minhag for Pesach. Unless all the chachamim get together and make a decision. It seemed he left Provence. I think he was also afraid for his life. Maybe I don't know why he left. But when I came to Spain, in Spain they need even more rain from Pesach till Shavuos. I told my chaverim that it doesn't make sense that they stop. It looks like there's a lot of countries like that. But I was afraid, I was hesitant to change the minhag. But now that I saw that there's a crisis because it was a year of famine and there was no rain, and the seeds were getting ruined. and he was in Pesach time, and he saw that everything was getting ruined. And they're in the middle of fasting that it should rain. And even on Shabbos Yontif, they were saying Yud Gimel Midos because it was a crisis. Now is the time for me to institute what I had a desire to do for many years. Ki bevadai sheyishmu l'cha be'eis tzara kazos. Of course, they're going to listen to me because there's a crisis. V'im yikayim aleim b'shana zos. What?
Can't waste a good crisis.
Yeah. V'im yikayim aleim b'shana zos yerav aleim lo yeshuv mimena. And once they do it this year, they'll continue doing it. V'chem bevadei osim ela shehitu es levavam. They would have done it, but the naysayers swayed their hearts. They savu es taita macharonis, and they ended up not doing it. So, and then he writes in the last page, on page 7. I wrote the when I underlined Harei Hochachti in the bottom of the first column. If I don't do she be Ashkenaz she eretz gedol moed tzarfus v'chol artzos Ashkenaz eretz azos. All these lands, b'chal kulam shrichim matar, zos b'chal kulam shrichim matar bein pesach atzeres ubevadei rabim heim v'chol mishal b'berachas hashanim u'haski sham k'nei eretz yisrael b'charif. They could say the same Tal Matar already in the beginning of the right after Sukkot. Uber osiki he to a slave hakol levilti kabo mimeni diri olakim chayim gamani chazarti bi milisho ulahasi bebeis hakneses shani mispal bo. I desisted as well. Afal bisha yisi yochel l'shol, even though I could have said it. Afal bisha ani yochid kevin shitzarach rabimu, and it was for the benefit of the rabbi. Come over tzisi lasos agudos. I didn't want to make a division. He said he wrote this on Chal Moed. He wouldn't have written it. Because it was a Chil Hashem. Because people were saying that the Rosh is, he's what I want to say what they said. It's Tzarech HaMoed because it's Shai of Hadadamin. And then in the last paragraph it says, "Kol ela advarim nechonim advarim kulam nechuchem heim lemebim yisharim umotzei das v'dvarim shel tam al kain chasamti shmi." He had it endorsed. The statement it was endorsed by David HaKohen and Yisro Rav Yosef and Yisachar Levi ben Rav Yugusio, Moshe HaKohen Rav Yehuda. Does anybody know what Nun Ayin stands for? What? Okay, thank you. I knew you would know. Okay, so there you have it. That the Rosh, he was ready to go against. He paskined that way that they should say Mashav Ruach on Pesach, and there was an uproar, and then he because it was such a big tumult, and he was hopeful that would become the new minhag, like they did in Provincia. But at least Provincia did it by in the Cheshvan. But he didn't. He saw that it wasn't going to go over well, and it was going to be a machokas. So he deferred because of the machokas. So here again, I'm going to ask you my question: how could he change a minhag like that? It was the minhag of foosball was unique to Spain. In Spain, they didn't write prosbols. The whole world wrote prosbols. In Spain, they decided you don't need to write prosbols, and it's a big tumult why they have such a minute. But Mashiv Ruach, throughout the world, they were doing it the way it says in the Gemara, because the Rosh was in Germany, and he was in France, and he's in Spain, and we could assume that they probably. Well, in France they did it halfway. In France they did it. They started Mashiv Ruach. Early. in Cheshire, but they still said the same Talmutar. They said the same bracha after Pesach. So, but that was this was so it wasn't just like one place where they were doing it; it was all over. So, how come the Rush ignored the principle of Puk Chazi Ma Amar Davar? That's my kasha. And it bothers me so much that I looked in a lot of places and I didn't see anybody even ask the kasha. When nobody asks your kasha, it's bad news. It means there's something wrong with the kasha. But how come nobody asked the kasha? I think it's a very good kasha. No.
I think the problem is that Bavel was Bavel at the time. We weren't spread out all over the place, and then suddenly we're in different places. For instance, what do we do in Australia, in the Southern Hemisphere?
Yeah, that's a.
They weren't in Australia yet. They didn't have the Southern Hemisphere. They only
That's
had
that's the excellent question, and there's a big machlokes what they do in Australia, because even according to even if you disagree with the Rush, but it could be in a different hemisphere. That's a big. When we learned this, I called up Rabbi Binyamin Wurzberger who's the head of the kollel in Melbourne, and I think he told me some do it one way and some do it the other way. There was a famous tshuva written by, I think, a sefer called Torah's Chaim, 200 years ago, where he first addressed this question of what to do in Australia.
During the pandemic in Australia, they closed all the shuls.
What?
During the pandemic in Australia, they closed all the shuls in Melbourne for a long, long time. One of the initiatives was to get everybody to finally decide among the shuls, whatever you're davening on anyway, that you would daven whatever your shul davening. And the shuls all have different minhagim around them.
So they couldn't. What is it? What is the halacha here, by the way? Do we pass like the Rush or we don't pass like the Rush? So if you turn to page 8, the Beis Yosef says on the Tur says in the middle of the page. The Tur says the Tur is the Rush, the son of the Rush. Koso Adoni Avi Rush b'tshuva she'ela sheichol nushal achakach b'richos Hashem k'fei tzorchem. He passes like the Rush, like his father. He even though the Rush didn't want to make a machlokas in Spain, but the Tur codified it like his father. So in the Beis Yosef it says because of Rabbeinu Hagadol Mari Abuhav Zal. The Mari is Rav Yitzchak Abuhav. He wrote very little, but one of the things he wrote was a commentary on the Tur, and he was he was the Rebbe, one of the Rebbes of one of the Rebbeim of the Beis Yosef. So that's he was in that period in the
Institute Smith.
he was the Rebbe also of the Mari Beirav, who. But he with the Mari Beirav he wanted into institute.
You're right. Marie Barav wanted to.
Yeah. So
Institute Smith.
so he said because Rabbeinu go Mari Abuhav Vizel Zal Shami Achash Rush Kasabosa Shua Shavel Bishu Yachad Hayo Yachal Lisho Me Achash Zeh Hadavar Hu Tzarchi Rabim. The Rushes really I could have said Mashav Ruach El Kadesh Lo Yanir Shehem Agudas Agudos. Near Mikan Raya, Shema Yachid Tov, Vishol Geshem Bizman, She Aya Min Hadin Lishol Tal, Shalo Yachser. If somebody made a mistake, in other words, he goes along with the Rush, that he doesn't want to make a tumult, so everybody should say Tal. But let's say somebody made a mistake, and they started saying Mashav Ruach after Sukkos, is Mashem B'din Lishol Tal Shalo Yachser, that he doesn't have to repeat Shemon Esrei. Achar she'emes nira kedivi harush. The Rush's position is more correct. Vafil b'yachid yesh lo makom l'spal. Ela mehasiba niskara secher shespal b'di'eved she'ein bekan zos ha'churban nira she'ein lo lachser v'tzarchin. What does that mean, this last line? I don't know what the last line means. What?
So in general, the Losh seems to be the correct, but we don't follow the Losh. However, in this case, shemitpared b'diavad, she'en dechan chuzat u'chubah. You're not going to get into this problem of the machloket and
Oh, you're right. Since in this case, yeah, excellent. In this case, since there's not going to be enzo sachurba, there's not going to be a machlokes because he's davening privately near shein lo lachzor, so he doesn't have to repeat Shemon Esrei because he could be saimech on the sheet of the rush. So he holds that the ikar halacha is like the rush, and then comes the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef right after it says Aniyas Taiti. Ad Kan L'Shem means the end of that piece. But the Beis Yosef says Aniyas Taiti. Hayinir Shekem Yishon Niskabel Divi Rush. The whole world doesn't do like the rush. Havilei Sugin the Amad Loka Rush. So he makes my point that that's Puk Chazim Ahmed Dvar. The Hilka Chatov V'Shol Geshem Tzarech Lachzor Afilu Be'eretz Shekul B'Chol Tzrichin Geshem B'Mos Achama. If you made a mistake and you said Geshem when it's time to say Tal, you have to daven over again. You call Kemish Arav Suffolk Oleina was a dover. Mi Yikal Rosho Kenegdo Uchein Roy Lotzis Midei Suffolk Uspao B'Taras the Davas. He's willing. He holds Meikar Din Halach's not like the rush, but nonetheless you should daven over again B'Taras Daras and Davins and say. And not say Mashiv and say not say saying Talmater, but the Mashiv Ruach. But you see that there's a machlokas here between the Beis Yosef and the Mari Avuv, exactly what the halach is. In the Shulchan Aruch, it how does it play out? It plays out that the Shulchan Aruch says on page 9, Umiu im be'eretz achas kula hatzricha mater b'mosacham ataba yachav v'shal mater v'verchas hashanim. The same shayla. Somebody by mistake said the same tal mater, and it's before.
It's after.
It's after Zayin Cheshvan.
It's after Pesach.
What? No, this is after Sukkot.
There's a chama.
It's a chama, it's summertime.
It's after Pesach.
Summertime.
Oh, it's in the summer. Okay, and he said saying tal mater in the summer. Im rotze chozer u'mispal b'toras nedava below she'ela b'verchas hashanim. Aval einu mechuyav lachzor klal. So that's the Beis Yosef that we just saw, and the I'm sorry. He says below she'ela b'shem, and then in the parentheses it says aval einu mechuyav lachzor klal. But he's not obligated to be chayzer. So the way the poskim understand it is that the Ramah, this parentheses, Aval Einu Mechuyev Lachzor Klal, is Ramah. The Ramah, right after, you see it says, Beis Yosef B'Shem Mahari, Varam Varam, Sabri Lu Charush.
The imrotze, those two words. Are
So what?
What about the two words imrotze?
They're also in parentheses. Imrotze chozer
Also in
u'mispal.
Yeah, Imrotze, that he put in also the Ramah. So the Ramah it holds like the Mari Avuv, that Ikar Din Yotze. But if you want to, then you could say Tfilas and Dava. But the Beis Yosef holds the Ikar Din you're not Yotze. But he says it's still better to have in mind that it's in Dava just in case the halacha is like the rush. That's the way.
Where does the Rambam talk about?
There's a whole. I didn't tell you though. The Rambam has a sheet that Rambam talks about it. There's a lot of. It's a very big topic. I just try
I don't
to.
remember doing it last time either, the Rambam, did we?
Yes, we did. We did the Rambam. How can you not remember? We did the
If the
Rambam.
Rambam says, how did they lose? You got the Rambam and the Rush, you should win.
I
It's
don't
2
know.
out of 3
I
for
don't
the,
remember that.
But what's the upshot in terms of when you can?
So what's the answer to my question? How come we don't say that if there's a minhag hamakom? Yeah. So I'll tell you my teretz to this kasha. I don't know if it's right, but if you remember, on page 2, the Magen Avram explains why there's a principle that minhag oker halacha. So he says on page 2, he quotes on the bottom of page 2, Marino Isaac Stein, the Biuros and the Smag Kosov, Hadam Rina, Minhag Oker Halacha, Yishalmi uses that lotion. Hainu afilu rov day asfiruhu aser v'atalmud misayehu ha'minhag bani al pi ha'psikta o svarim chitzonim. Even though in the Gemara says it's aser, but there's svarim chitzonim, which means svarim that were written later, but they weren't part of Shas, like Masechtas Ktanis. Amina minagog halacha. Why? The vade kain kiblu avosenu ish mipi ish, because it must be that the Chachamim in previous generations decided that's halacha. So what I would say, therefore, is that somebody of the stature of the Rosh is not bound what the previous generations held. It's not the only reason why there's exactly look and see what the people did is because that means that there was that Chachamim for the last few hundred years did it that way. So the Rosh obviously felt, so what? So they did it the last few hundred years. I disagree with them. The Rosh was one of the three Amudei Horah that the Beis Yosef relies on, and he was great enough to say. I showed you last week the Ramosha says that sometimes you could even disagree with the Rishon, which is like astounding that he said that.
That he can.
Yeah, he was probably the only one that would do that. The Vilna Gaon disagreed with Rishonim because the Vilna Gaon it was accepted. The Vilna Gaon was as great as the Rishonim. So the Rosh, you see the greatness of the Rosh. These two tshuvos reflect the greatness of the Rosh. That the Rosh was so strong in his conviction that the Rosh was willing to go against all the people.
He reversed himself.
Yeah. Now, what bothered me is, so if he held that was halacha, then how come he said that he backed off? How could you back off if that's halacha? So that's what I was thinking. They were because they were allowed to follow the minhag because that was also based on gedolim. So the Elu Ve'elu, so they were following their poskim. So their poskim holder was okay. So they did what their poskim held, and it seems that like even the Rosh was willing. He himself davened. It's as he said when he was in the shul. He davened like they davened because he was willing to be. There was that psak of the minhag ha'olam had validity because it was based on gedolim. But the Rosh had his Lamaisa. He didn't hold that way. He held that that's not the halacha. So what it reflects is the kayach of Chachamim, and I was going to show you, but I mean we've seen it before. Ramosha has a beautiful in the Hakdama to the first Chayil Kavar Chaim. He talks about Elu Ve'elu Divri Kim Chaim, that a posek has the authority to paskin, and he doesn't have to worry that maybe he's making a mistake. If he's somebody that's worthy to be a posek, because that's the way Torah operates. That the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted the poskim in each door to decide the halacha, and if because Torah L'Abishamayim, and even if he's not mechavin the emes, even if he says a pshat in the Gemara, and if you would go back and ask Ravina Ravashi, they would say no, that's not the right pshat. It doesn't matter, but he's a posek, he paskin, and that's why Ramosha has many, I don't know if we call them radical, but original psakim about all sorts of things, and you see how Ramosha was the most, as his namesake. Moshe was Anu Mikol Adam. Ramosha was the same way. He was so unassuming. Mostly, I don't know if anybody saw Ramosha. I saw Ramosha. You saw him. He was the most unassuming person. You would never know he was a Rosh Yeshiva. But when it came to taking a position, he was like the rock of Gibraltar. You couldn't bend him. So anyway, that's how I think the Rosh was, because of who he was. I saw in this one survey that they considered the Rosh like a malach. So the Rosh therefore had the authority to change the minhag.
No, thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Feel better.